Well, hello and welcome to the 6th anniversary episode of the Adventures in Advising podcast. Matt Markin and Ryan Shuckle here. Thank you for listening to these interviews, sharing episodes on social media, sending messages, everything. This podcast continues because of you, and no doubt about that. So, Ryan, 2026, 6 years of the podcast. Can we make it to a 7th anniversary?
Well, I'm always up for a challenge, but man, sometimes I think about just the magnitude of stuff. And I'm like, so many episodes, so much to listen to, so many guests. And I'm like, so many people who listened and watched. That's one of the things that is really impressive is the engagement and that kind of effect on our community and our field. Like I've said before, I'm just glad to be a part of it and to keep it rolling.
Yeah, and we're super thrilled for this episode. And in a little bit, we'll be interviewing Jeff Elliott from Purdue University. But first up, we're going to learn more about the NACADA Institutes. And we have some returning friends and a new friend to the podcast. Let's go ahead and bring them on. So we have Dana Zahorik, Kyle Ross, and Jennifer Rush. Hello, friends.
Hello. Good to see you again. And happy 6-year anniversary of the podcast. That's awesome. Also, time flies. Where did 6 years go? Time is an illusion.
Yes, for sure. So, Kyle and Dana, I want to ask you this question. Now, you're kind of on this podcast talking about the Institute, so different role than previous episodes that you've been on. So, what led you to becoming an Institute faculty member?
Take it away, Dana.
You go ahead.
Okay, fine. All right. So I became a faculty member when I stepped into the role of executive director of NACADA, but I was really intentional and thoughtful about would I be effective as a faculty member at any of these institutes? And so it arrived at serving as a faculty for the Institute for Academic Advising that is typically hosted in the summer, as well as the Assessment Institute. Because a lot of my background and training has been in change management and leadership. And that's where I feel like I can best serve the institutes is delivering that content. So grateful to always have the opportunity to be able to talk to people about how do you navigate change? How do you process people's feelings, thoughts, and reactions as they're going through that together? How does that tie into assessment? How does that tie into your general advising practice? And so I've been in serving as faculty for a couple of years now and love every opportunity I get to do so. Dana?
So I was president in 16-17. And when I finished up that leadership opportunity of a lifetime, I was searching for something else to do. And I just found so much value in the connections, the networking, and the group think that I wanted to be part of that even more. So same thing. I'm also part of the Consultants Bureau. And while we're working with individual colleges, defining gaps and problem solving, I loved it, the fact that we could all come together as a group of administrators. And there's many times where somebody has a solution to something that you are trying to figure out. And I may be faculty, but I'll tell you what, I come home with take-homes every time. We implemented gray days for our advisors, which is like allowing advisors 1 day a month to just work on projects. Like that's an appreciation project. That was a takeaway for me 1 year. And it's I've shared it with other people. So it's just such a huge networking opportunity. So I enjoy leading, but I also enjoy learning just as much.
Well, thank you both. And Jennifer, new to the podcast, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role in NACADA?
Sure. Jennifer Rush, I am the assistant director of the Institutes. I also help out with the region conferences. Been with NACADA for over 16 years now, and my main focus has always been the Institutes and working directly with the faculty.
Well, it's fantastic to have you all on, and I had a chance early in my career, maybe before I was really ready for it, to participate in an institute, St. Pete Beach, Florida, a long time ago. But I also got to do a couple summers ago in Madison, get to return to the institute format. As someone who's familiar with it, I appreciate that structure so much. But how would you all describe the NACADA Institutes?
I can start us off with that. Depending on if you're brand new to NACADA events or if you've been to the annual conference, you'll notice this is like a smaller format, a little more intimate. So the smaller participant format just allows for that additional networking. You have the ability to create an action plan that meets your own needs. So you can come to the Institute, have something that you want to address, and then it's like a group think tank. If you've ever been to a conference and you have something that you want to address, and then you get home, you set your materials aside, and then you just never do it. We start the work there, and that's what I like. So I actually come to the Institute, I talk about what I want to address, and we help you figure out what are the resources you need, what kind of support do you need. So our goal is to really create that foundation and the network that you need in order to be successful and carry out your action plan. So it dives down a little bit deeper. So between the NACADA Executive Office expertise, the faculty, and some other participants, and our fearless leader, Jen, who keeps us organized, we create like a huge learning network where people have a safe space to just share the good, bad, and ugly to help problem solve. So, and the learning doesn't stop there either, because it continues because you've made so many connections. I've reached out to so many people afterwards, and they've done the same, just to create some of those connections and not having to reinvent something that's already figured out.
Pretty sure Dana's reading off of my talking points, because she mentioned a lot of the things that I was going to share, or she's psychic, one of the two. And so a couple things I want to add there. For comparison, our region conferences are around 400 to 800 attendees, depending on the region location. Our annual conference typically around 2,500 to 3,000 attendees. And the institutes will be around 100 to 200 attendees. So emphasizing that opportunity for really intimate networking and connections as part of the institutes. The other piece of it too is that the content is developed and led by faculty who have deep expertise in their respective areas that they're presenting on and engaging with attendees on. And so rather than choosing from hundreds of sessions to attend, there's about anywhere from 9 to 15 sessions that are developed and led by faculty who are selected for service in that role.
Awesome. And as an example, like for this February, there's 2 different types of institutes going on.
Yes, we have our Assessment Institute and the Administrators Institute. So the Assessment Institute deep dive into all aspects of the assessment cycle and how you can develop a new assessment process, or if you're looking to refine one. And then the Administrators Institute is developed for people who are, whether you're new or really experienced as an advising leader, whether you're managing one unit or program to an entire institution's advising structure. That Administrators Institute's for you to really hone in on your leadership and have that place to network with peers and colleagues around similar issues that we're all facing in higher education.
So we've got some roles identified: administrator, and being involved in assessment. There's also the sort of the Summer Institute is a little bit more general in feel. Is that the right way to characterize it?
Jennifer can correct me where I go wrong on this one, but the Institute for Academic Advising really serves for your foundations to academic advising, whether, again, you're new to advising or you've been long time experienced. It's an opportunity for you to either learn all aspects of advising or dive more deeply into different areas that you want to refine around in your competencies and your skills and abilities. So I always say that one's like the Foundations of Academic Advising Institute when people are asking me about that one.
And I would say the Summer Institute is a week-long program as opposed to a 2.5-day program. So we have the time to cover an umbrella of topics related to advising as opposed to focusing in on one specific topic, like the Assessment and the Administrators Institute.
Now, you've already mentioned some of like the differences between the institutes and let's say a region conference or an annual conference in terms of attendance. But do you still have people that kind of mix it all together, that an institute is going to be a conference, or they're the same thing?
We do. And I think it's kind of important to define the differences. And Dana and Kyle touched on a lot of them. One, it is faculty driven as opposed to peer driven. 2, there is a set curriculum that we follow. 3, you guys do walk out with an action plan. These are extremely intense working institutes. We get you started at 8 a.m. We let you go about 5, and you will have homework more than likely to come back to the next day. And another key aspect between conferences and the institute is the institutes have what we call working groups or small groups, where you are paired, you're grouped with similar institution types throughout the entire event. So you have a core group of participants that you can form a networking with. And then at the end of the institute, when we do present our action plans, they give you feedback on that. So you get a chance to present and get the feedback on an action plan. And then you have something you can just take right back to your campus and start to implement. And that's the key differences between a conference, which you just choose your sessions, go learn from your peers. These are experts, faculty in the field. We go through an extensive hiring process, an intern process before they can become faculty, just to ensure that they know what they're talking about.
I was just going to follow that to say, if you're wondering, am I in the right role to attend this? We have a lot of new and aspiring advising administrators, and that was me when I first came in. I didn't have the title that matched necessarily what I did. So we also had a lot of people say that was something they wanted. So this year, we created a session specifically for new and aspiring advisors, so they know how to be successful leaders. So that was kind of, we do that. We have that curriculum, like Jennifer mentioned, but we also ask a question with our Track B folks. We ask of what keeps you up at night. And it was always such a great feedback loop because we listen for themes, and every year it's different. You know, one year you just heard the exhaustion of the multiple roles that they were all playing. And then one year, you know, it can be what's going on with, you know, politics or administration. And the next year it can be your COVID-19 students and how they're academically underprepared. We just follow what the needs are of the audience. And we're also a little bit of a support group, right? When you bring a whole bunch of us together and we're seeing some similar struggles, that's where we get that new energy to go back to campus and address those things.
So it certainly sounds like, you know, the Institute can focus on topics, but also be flexible. For each of you, is there someone ideally that you think should be attending these institutes?
I was going to say, I think I put in my notes here too, to remind people. So it shouldn't just be, it should be the decision makers too, right? So I can come in my role, but sometimes if some of the decision makers, invite them to come along with you. It's a beautiful thing when you see teams and how they are building each other up and inspiring. That helps, because if you're creating a plan, which we help you figure out, you know, where some of those hiccups might be, you can create a beautiful plan, but if you don't have the support and the voice and the leadership to implement those things, so bring them along. It's a beautiful thing. We've seen it unfold nicely.
I want to echo that because it is really powerful for those who make the decisions and have the budgets to really see and learn from their people on their teams. So with the Institute for Academic Advising, I've worked with a couple of groups that brought in a whole advising office or a whole department or key constituents from across their whole institution to come together and really dive into a problem and practice they were trying to improve around at their institution. And one of the most helpful pieces was having that key decision maker there, because rather than them saying, okay, well, we have this plan we hope to get support from, instead of having that mentality, leaving the institute, that decision maker could be there and say, nope, we have the budget for it and we're going to do it. Or yes, I support this, those answers in real time. And then that person also being able to say, wow, I had no idea that this is how it works, or this was really informative. So I always recommend bring people of all levels and bring people of all range of expertise, new to have been in advising for 15, 25 years, because there is always going to be something helpful to every single one of those attendees at these institutes. Now, the Assessment Institute and the Administrators Institute more focused on leadership and assessment, but I would say that still applies there too, where if you are a person who's brand new to assessment, come to the Assessment Institute if you want to learn more about it. If you've been conducting assessment for 20 years, great. Pick apart one piece of your assessment plan you currently have in place and look at refining that and engaging with your peers and colleagues across the world who want to talk about that. And so I'd say new to experienced, all kinds of levels, all are welcome as long as they have an interest in that specific topic that's being addressed.
Can I add one more thing?
Go for it.
So track B2, we've had a lot of conversations about advising administrators play these multiple roles. You are, having conversations about enrollment management. You're talking about financial aid, retention. And so we have broadened that scope to make sure that we're addressing all the intersections of advising for that track B conversation. So that if you have attended in the past and you're intrigued by this, you may want to sign up because of the curriculum is different, and hope to join us.
Hey, Dana, can I jump in there and ask you to clarify what's track A versus track B at the Administrators Institute?
Why, yes. So with the track B, that is like an institution-wide sort of management and leadership. And we have in the past have done the topic related. And then the track A, it can be an individual or a team, but you're creating your own individual plan. And you'll be similar to what Jennifer said earlier, you're going to be with a group of 2-year folks or four-year college or private colleges. We try to get you in a group of people so that you can share similar situations that you're trying to solve. And it's like a mini consulting. Both at the end of the second day, Jennifer, consultations, track A folks will then have the opportunity to meet up with some of the faculty. You get 15 minutes to say, here's my plan, here's what I'm hoping to solve. And that 15-minute conversation provides you additional resources that you may need, including some of the NACADA journals, or we may refer you to the clearinghouse where there's some great research and articles, but we make sure, track B also does the consulting. Thank you. But it's just a great opportunity. Plus, in addition to all that, if that's not enough, you also get the concurrent breakout sessions that you can pick from that kind of align with your plan that you're hoping to achieve.
And then with a couple of the institutes coming up in February, what's the cost of it and where are they going to be held?
Okay, the Assessment Institute is going to be February 4th through 6th, and the Administrators Institute is February 9th through 11th. They are both going to be held at the Kansas City Marriott Country Club Plaza in Kansas City, Missouri. Cost for a NACADA member through January 20th is $11.75. A non-member would be $13.75. After January 20th, it goes up to $12.75 and $14.75 respectively. So I would suggest getting your registration in before January 20th to save a little bit of money. But same hotel for both. It just makes it easier on those of us who are planning. We don't have to pack up and ship and unpack and reset everything up. But it's also ideal if you want to attend both institutes, which we do have a handful of people that do that. It's not unheard of for people to attend both.
Back a couple summers ago, when a team of folks from my institution were able to go to Madison, we were benefiting from sort of the leftovers from a state initiative on advisor training and development. So we had some funding that could support that activity. So there's going to be someone listening to this who's like, I want to go, but how? How do I get the resources and the commitment, and how do I secure the funding to do so? Any recommendations?
So I think I do this with my own professional growth plan. I do try to tie it to like my annual review whenever I can, if that makes sense. And then if you tie your project to the strategic priorities of the college, and they can see that the work that you're doing at the institute is going to provide a new ROI. So for example, there was a group one time that was creating a student success class that academic advisors were leading. And the data in turn ended up increasing retention rates. So you could create an ROI on that to show how many additional people you retained per credit and calculate that out. So you could really sell it by use of your own data.
One thing that kind of also goes on a piece of advice I have for anyone who's attending the institutes is to come with a problem in mind that you're looking to improve around. Sometimes we get folks who attend the institute not knowing what to expect, and they leave wishing that they had identified that topic in advance so that they knew what they're coming in with to frame their mind around what assessment activity are they really trying to create, develop, or maintain, what goals they have for their personal and professional growth, or what goals they are trying to accomplish around their whole advising unit, or just for their team. So if you identify that problem practice from the get-go, then that helps you advocate to other folks that have the decision-making authority over the budget to send you, to say, here's why I'm going, here's what it is I'm trying to accomplish. And it also serves the institution, because at the end of the day, I'm going to walk away with this action plan that I'm already on step 1 or 2 on to really target that area that aligns with, maybe it's the institution's strategic plan, maybe it's a critical issue that the institution identified that team needs to be responsible for tackling.
And we actually have on our website a download of a templated email that you can send to your supervisor, decision makers, that kind of explains all of that for you. And each one is customized to this said event.
Awesome. Great advice. So last question, and because we have the Assessment Institute and the Administrators Institute in February, let's sum it all up. I want to hear your best 30-second to 1-minute pitch on why someone should attend either one or both. So let's start with Kyle, and then we'll go to Dana.
Didn't practice this one enough yet, but let's see how I do. If you're looking for a place for intimate connection, networking with peers and colleagues across the world who want to dive deeply into advising leadership, administration, and assessment, look no further than our Winter Institutes offering this February for the Administrators Institute and the Assessment Institute, where you get to identify a problem practice that you're trying to resolve for your home institution, and then really develop that action plan in consultation with faculty who are experts in the field and have developed the curriculum really thoughtfully and intentionally for you to get the best and what you need out of that time. Hope to see you there. That was a bad run through, but hey, I did what I could.
No, and it was 37 seconds. Awesome. All right, Dana, let's go.
That was pretty good. So I would just say there's a high likelihood that somebody else at the Institute has been or has experienced similar challenges. I mentioned earlier, I have few original ideas. I've stolen them from other NACADA members. So my advising model, I adapted from Palo Alto Community College. Thank you, Palo Alto. University of Kentucky, UC Davis borrowed me training materials. So I didn't have to invest as much time and energy because fellow NACADA members are very generous with sharing their materials and practices to help define your gaps and address them.
Perfect. And 32 seconds there. Awesome. I think maybe people are sold on wanting to go and hopefully be able to get the funding to go as well. But Dana, Kyle, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast and sharing about the institutes.
Thank you
for having us.
Thanks for having us. Good to see you, and happy 6-year anniversary.
Really looking forward to this one. I know this is someone that we've had on our list for a while now, and that is the wonderful Jeff Elliott. And Jeff is the Executive Director of University Undergraduate Academic Advising at Purdue University. With over 25 years in advising and student success leadership, Jeff's current work focuses on advisor development, equitable systems for students, and the ethical integration of artificial intelligence, a topic that Ryan and I have chatted about quite a bit on this podcast, in higher education with an emphasis on the use of AI to support academic advising. Jeff holds a PhD in higher education administration and recently completed a 1-year term as a NACADA board member. He also served with NACADA as a state liaison, a region conference chair, a region chair, and an ELP mentor. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate it. You just said 20 or more than 25 years. And even though I wrote that, like you said, Ryan, like sometimes you're faced with the reality of the time that you've spent in something. So that was interesting to hear, but it's exciting. It's kind of fun. 2026 and a conversation about AI is about as good as it gets.
Yeah, it'll keep you young, won't it?
I hope so.
Well, I just kind of reading your bio. It just reminded me of how we first met because it was on here that you've been a region conference chair. And I swear we met in 2019, very briefly at the annual conference at a region conference session or prep session for the following year. So time definitely flies.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I forgot about that. I just, the people I know all tend to sort of blend the how we met, the origin stories all blend together over time. And I just have to operate on faith that we did have an initial introduction. It's not one of those where you're around somebody for so long, you realize you know each other without ever actually being introduced. So,
well, just yesterday I was asking Ryan, I was like, I think I remember when I met Jeff, I was like, have you met Jeff before?
Yeah. And I was like, look, we've been in so many rooms together. And snippets of conversation here and there, and it's nice to focus, and have these moments. What it makes me think of, if I'm thinking about resolutions for 2026, it's be more intentional about the relationships you build, and make sure you spend focused time. I'm a little bit of a collector. I like new ideas, new perspectives, and so sometimes that can lead to a little bit more surface level conversation. But I'm going to try to go a little bit deeper in 2026.
I like that. That's really cool.
So, Jeff, of course, this isn't Adventures in Advising without asking you this first question. Yes, we've read your bio, but can you expand on it? Give us your origin story in higher ed.
Well, it's interesting because my experience as an undergraduate has a lot to do with how like for most of us, how I got here. But I started out many, many years ago as a student who was going to college because I just sort of had an implicit expectation that I was going to go. I'm from a small rural town in the South. There was two groups of people, the ones who planned to stay there and the others who were going to college and planning to go off. I had no idea which one I was. I just knew the not staying there part was the only real priority. And I spent 4 years as a spectacularly failing BFA student. And I would suggest to anybody who's been in advising for a significant amount of time, if you haven't done this, go pull your own undergrad transcript and read it the way we read student stories. What I saw was somebody that's clear. Like what was missing was a lack of direction. There was like Doug Reynolds at the University of Tennessee always like to say, when you look at grades and see Porsches and Pintos, it was either A's or it was D's and F's. And so I was in and out too. I took a semester off. My school invited me to take a semester off after another year in. I was in and out, and I just struggled. And it didn't strike me until I took a gen ed class out of frustration, just because I didn't know what else to do. My gosh, what a common story this is. And an instructor, I wrote a paper, and the instructor said, you're a good writer. Have you thought about this? And I hadn't. But after that, we followed up with another conversation. It's the first time anybody asked me why I was going to college. And so 4 years in, first time anybody asked that. And so it's a circuitous route, but I did end up eventually getting a bachelor's degree in English. And then I decided I wanted to go on and get a PhD and be one of these English professors, and went to Tennessee for my master's back in 98. And learned that I, at the time, did not have the academic discipline to do a PhD in the humanities. I don't have that brain. And but I discovered, because my previous institution didn't have this kind of guidance, as a part of my assistantship working in the writing center. And I was blown away by this idea of people whose jobs it was to just work with students and like help people figure things out. So I went to Stephen F. Austin State in Texas for my first job as the director of the Writing Center and assistant director of the Academic Assistance Center there. Then I moved back to Tennessee. I worked for 5 years at a community college, and then back to UT. And then it's there where I spent 10 years really kind of leaning into what it meant to not just be involved in that kind of student support, but to be really intentional about the control opportunities we have to guide it and to really do something, as a person with a space in leadership. I was very fortunate to be at Tennessee under the guidance of Ruth Darling, former president and all-star in NACADA. I say fortunate. Don't ever be sitting next to her and you work at Tennessee, and the region, the state rep or liaison is unavailable to finish the term. And so I'm sitting by her, and they go, "We need a volunteer." Well, I work at Tennessee, and they use the V word. And I'm sitting next to Ruth. So I was like, great, here we go. And I got up, I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I went and I sat down, and I was like, I'm kind of excited. I think this will be cool. And this was only my first or second conference experience. And she said, if you decide you want to get involved in NACADA, hold on to your hat. I've always remembered that, because she was absolutely right. Is the opportunity, and I think I love the organization because of people who innately want to support others. It's a part of why we do the work we do. Makes for a really great conference experience because everyone's just got that mindset. And so it's a really long way to say at this point, I've just kind of found my way into advising and learning that, one of my strengths, I think, is getting to know people and figuring out like, what do you do well and how do we find a way to get you in a place to do that more? And so and now I'm very fortunate to be at Purdue where I've actually got that opportunity, and I'm looking forward to talking more about it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly we've heard the story of the student who arrives unsure of their ultimate goal, and advising arises on that process, both in the academic and the professional sense, as we learn about ourselves and the world. And I'm interested a little bit in your background, making that transition from the learning center perspective to the advising perspective. What did you find really helpful and like transferable from those contexts when you moved that sort of, part of the student support dynamic?
My introduction to advising was that position at a community college, which was a combination center that provided tutoring and advising services. And I honestly got the job because of the strength of my tutoring experience and expertise, and the fact that no one else in the room knew any more than I did about advising when I interviewed. So I arrived, I sat down, I was like, okay, let's see what we're going to do here. And I think part of the reason that I fell in love right away was how I just kept peeling that onion. I know I spent hundreds of hours on the NACADA site, pouring through things, finding articles, listening to recordings of things, just because every time I thought that I had figured out exactly what it is we needed to do to be a good service to students, I would uncover some other element of it. And so I think that kind of gear switch, because then I had the chance, they split the office up at one point. And the vice president came in and said, you're going to get to choose which direction you want to go. And they were putting tutoring and academics, and like some schools do, they put advising in student affairs. I know I should have waited. I know I should have said, give me some time to think about it. But as soon as she finished her sentence, I said, I want to go with advising. I liked the idea of the way that you connect with students. And there's one little nugget of tutoring that I learned in the Writing Center at Tennessee that I always bring back with me, but it's kind of the core way to help people think about how they do what they do. We always used to like to tell tutors, if you're talking more than half the time, you're talking too much. And I think you kind of ground it that way to say, like, if you're not giving people that space, because if you're going to be a writing tutor, you got to get really comfortable with uncomfortable silence. And you have to ask a question and then sit and realize they are waiting for you to get tired of waiting and ask or answer it yourself. And so I just think it was an interesting framework for, what it is that you do to start that relationship building.
Love that. And I kind of want to maybe expand upon that with working with advisors and kind of like your leadership strategies, because you've had various leadership roles. And in a previous conversation, you had mentioned about you emphasize the value of treating advisors the way we treat students. What does that look like in practice?
Well, okay. Wow. I don't think I thought enough about that. That's even when it gets posed back to me, because when I interviewed for this job, that was a core part of my, the platform, I guess, that I was using to make my case for this position. And what I just said was like, look, at the end of the day, what we want our advisors to do is recognize the lived experiences of our students and to recognize that individually they bring something unique, and that we have an obligation to help them unpack dreams and things that they want to accomplish, and help them like figure out where sometimes there's a reality to what they want to do and sometimes there's not, and how you make some of that happen. And really sort of recognizing individual value when it becomes sometimes very easy to see everybody as a collective. So when you think about it that way, if you're thinking about as somebody who supervises or leads on a campus in the area of advising, it's the same thing. Like, this is a severely underpaid profession. This is a profession that continuously struggles to justify the value of what it does to university leaders around the country and college leaders. It is a place also where people take on, out of just a sense of sort of ethical and social obligation, a sort of sense of duty towards these students that they work with. And that's a burden. I mean, it's not to say that it's a burden in a negative way, but we just acknowledge you take things on when you do that. And I think we have to, be sure that advisors hear us talk that way and recognize that we're not always going to be able to get the salaries up, and we're still sometimes going to have leadership that maybe still needs to be coached in what it is that we actually do, but we haven't forgotten you as an individual. And, and I think about how many times everybody that's listening to this has had a conversation with a student, and at the core of the need for that meeting is to just feel seen and to be, sort of encouraged to understand, you belong here, you got here for a reason, and you have every right to be here, and we're here for you. So, I think thinking about it that way, and then, as we think about supporting advisors, also kind of recognizing you also need to recognize what they're capable of and raise that bar. And I am someone that I expect more. I don't try to push people too much, but I know what Purdue accomplishes, and I know what our advisors are capable of. We have 275 advisors at this university, and it is a remarkable community of folks who have just a crazy range of talents and skills. And I think thinking about it, them the way that I would think when I look at an undergrad population, how you marvel at, oh my God, this is a room full of future astronauts and doctors and people who are just going to go and be really great members of their community, and they're going to do all these wonderful things. It's the same thing that's happening with the folks we work with too. So, I don't know that message is always as clear as it can be, but it never changes my thinking about, how we approach supporting advising.
Well, I think a lot of people have a conception of an advising administrator, somebody who leads a team of advisors in an advising center or in some sort of administrative or academic unit. And I'm curious, when you imagine or think back on yourself making that decision to go with advising in the restructure, to now your perspective that's informed by being a state liaison and a region chair and that kind of stuff. What would you say was the biggest shift for you in thinking about advising from the individual advisor-student relationship to an institution of hundreds of advisors?
Oh man, I'm still learning. I'm 4 years in, 4.5 or so years in, and I'm still learning that there is no such thing as an effective leadership learning experience before you take the role. And there's a lot that's applicable in my past, but there's more that you just have to learn as you go. And I think recognizing that is a part of it. For me, I really try to be transparent that I try to be self-aware about my shortcomings and the things that I'm able to do. And I try to communicate that to folks in a way to, not necessarily erode any confidence in me, but to know that what I'm saying is I'm never going to try to pretend that I understand everything and I know all of it. And, coming back to your question, you start in as a state liaison and you're told almost nothing. And then you come in and you sit down with a group of people, and now I'm part of a team, and none of us have been told much of anything. And we figure things out as we go. And one of the reasons that I'm always pressing our advisors to get involved with NACADA is there's a huge value in working together with people who don't owe you anything. And they don't report to you. They can get up and walk out of the room. And it forces you to learn a level of diplomacy that I don't know that you can learn elsewhere. And so in this job, for example, I have a tremendous amount of responsibility for university advising, but the advising directors in the college just have a dotted reporting line to me. And I really try not to, try to strong arm too much of that reporting line. And I realized I am here at the graces of the academic colleges, and I'm here as a service to those colleges. And so, had I not had that progressive experience in NACADA of knowing, as your membership gets, I mean, I'll go from region 3 to region 5, the smallest to one of the largest, and you're still trying to figure out how to navigate this in a way that you can't please everybody, but you need everyone to know I'm going to do my best to listen, and I'm going to try my best to find wherever that, negotiation point is that makes us all, at least makes us all feel satisfied.
Oh yeah, I like how you put it with the negotiation point. Because just like you're saying, like anyone in NACADA on these, like whether it's a task force or a region steering committee, a conference committee, it's all volunteer. They still have their other jobs they're getting paid to do, but there's still an obligation to get what you need to get done with NACADA. And if you're the one that's leading it, you gotta figure it out and have that diplomacy. Yeah. Now, let's say you have like a new administrator that's starting out, in someone that's going into leadership. Sometimes maybe they feel like they're being thrown to the deep end. You kind of chatted, alluded to that as well, whether it's with NACADA or somewhere else. But what advice do you have, like, to give someone that's taking their first leadership role in, let's say, advising?
One of the first things I will say is come to terms with delegation guilt. And I mean by that, that you're going to have people either reporting to you or working with you that you're going to need to ask to do the work. And we are all the kinds of folks that are willing to roll up our sleeves and do that work ourselves. And more often than not, if you're in an administrative role, it's because you worked your way through to that and earned your stripes and you made your way there by doing the work. And it feels like you are, if it's something I know I can do, like I know I can do it. Is it this thing over here, doing this workflow, taking care of whatever these things are? I know I can do those things. What's the message to the people who report to me if I'm trying to do all the things that they're supposed to be there for? And also like that it's your role. And so I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with when they're new to, as you go into progressive leadership roles, you're most likely going to be working with more people and you're going to need them to do more. And I find, back to the comparison of serving students and serving advisors is it's experiential learning. It's an opportunity sometimes to do something they've never done before. And so with that, coming to terms with delegation guilt is also coming to terms with the fact that getting something done is better than getting something done your way. And I think that it's something that a lot of folks, myself included, I'll see, that is not the way I would have done that, but it's finished. And we're ready to move forward. And as long as it's accomplishing what it's supposed to do, we just need to be at peace with that. We're asked to do way too much as it is. To try also to drive yourself into the ground for perfection it's a lost cause.
Yeah, I'll always give a shout out to the cult of done. I know we have feelings about cults, but it's a thing on the internet where a lot of creative types talk about the value of prioritizing the project being done, not the project being perfect. And that was something that I keep reminding myself of. Whether we think our way is perfect or not, there's some real value in being done with things. So
yeah, I gotta say, my master's and bachelor's degrees are in English literature. I also worked with the College of Arts and Sciences at Tennessee, so in the liberal arts college there. And my role during the last part of my time there was to work with the humanities and interdisciplinary programs. I learned so much from theater. Mm-hmm. I learned, like, it's really, what a really important thing about theater is it ain't half as bad for the audience as you think it is, because you know exactly the way it's supposed to be, precisely the way it's supposed to be, but they don't. And I just, like, it's amazing. And one of the things I love about the humanities is how much you can return to that and find things that are really practical, useful nuggets. So
absolutely. One of the useful nuggets I got introduced to talking with a prior guest on the podcast was this idea of, like, reverse mentoring. The idea that we might set up a mentor program with a mentor and a mentee or whatever, and there's this hierarchy and structure and expectation. But I'm curious, in your role in the Emerging Leaders Program as a mentor, what did you learn from your mentees?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, okay. I will say one thing I learned is that and I think I should probably have already known this, is folks will say, I'm fine, I can take care of it, I got this. And you kind of need to have a little bit of doubt there to just say, well, why don't we go ahead and check in anyway? I would really like to do emerging leaders again, because you almost need to do it twice, because the first time is so much trial and error. I connected really well with my mentee. But then after the program ended, I actually ended up connecting more with a couple of people who weren't. They were just in that cohort. And it kind of happened that, there was something that aligned with something that I knew. Isabel Langham reached out to me about something, and then we started a partnership and a conversation that has been really rewarding for me. And I think, I guess there's so much to learn that I almost feel like you have to continually unpack it. A big part for me, I think, was just learning that I feel like that you got to continue to define your idea of service. How are you being of service to people, and how do you make that available? One of the things I realize now that I tell people all the time is, if you're going to find a mentor, number one, that's your job. You can sit around and wait for a mentor to come to you and ask if you want some. That's a needle in a haystack. But you see somebody, and I'm, 15 years into a wonderful relationship with Kathleen Smith, who, just because she came to our campus and I listened and I heard things that really rang true with me. I've never done this. I still don't know what prompted me to do it. But when she was done talking, I walked up and I said, I could really use a mentor. Would you, be willing? And she just handed me her number, and then off we went. But also that it's your response. This is the thing I learned myself, is the responsibility of the mentee to kind of maintain that relationship and keep it alive. And then my role then is to make sure I'm available anytime. I need to know when you need me, but I need you to know that, like, those emails are not interruptions. That text is not a problem. That's just what I'm here for. And so I think I'm still far from good at this, but trying to be sure that people understand that I'm here, and I need you to take the first step and tell me what you need, and then I'll take it from there.
I mean, at the end of the day, you care. And I think that's what everyone that you're connected to, that you're mentoring, they can feel that, they can see that. And I think that's going to be what's most important.
Yeah.
Kind of switching gears a little bit, so at Purdue, there's something called Waypoints. And I was hoping you could kind of share with us a little bit about what that initiative is, and also kind of your personal connection to it as well.
Yeah, so Waypoints, we have an exploratory studies program, but many institutions do, where if students don't know exactly what they want to do, they have an option to enroll and take classes and learn more from advisors who are trained to help them in that way. But we have a cap on the number of hours you can remain in that program. And we have highly competitive STEM programs, computer science, mechanical engineering, things like that. And there are a lot of students who really want to do that. But the GPA is not cooperating. And they're still okay to stay at the institution. They're just not okay to go into what they really think is their goal. And they're in this spot now because we implemented a new policy a year or so ago that if you don't have a declared program and you're not eligible for exploratory, after 1 year, you are separated from the university. And to be sure that that's not a devastating experience for students, in the past, it had already been generated by the exploratory department. And I told them I'd like to repurpose that and bring it into my office, in part to separate it from exploratory, so students see like this is a different place that you're in. And so the goal is to tell students we got some hard conversations that we have to have, and I would never want anybody to say it this way to a student, but for simplicity's sake, do you want to be an engineer or do you want to be a boilermaker? Because you may not be able to be both. And we need to figure out which one's more important to you. And so, talk about the personal connection to that question that I never got asked about why are you going to college? there were a lot of values. You develop your values often when you're in this undergrad experience, and I'm kind of doing that, but there's no structure to it. I'm also sort of lost. I only, and good grief, what an exhausting experience it is to learn what you want to do through trial and error, right? Okay, I'm gonna try this one out. That didn't work. Try this one out. That didn't work. 8 years to get an undergrad degree. And so for me, what's really important is that what students hear first is the priority is you. It's not graduation here. If that's what your priority is, then that becomes ours. But what's important right now is that whatever happens after this, you have a say in it and it aligns with what you want to accomplish. So the goal with that program is to help these students find something that meets their, and we've seen lots of different things. We've seen students who really want to do something, but they don't really feel like that's a good career pathway. And they need someone to sit down with them to say, look, the motion P on a degree has a value on its own. But also, you invest a lot of the value in your degree once you get out of here. I always like to say, like, there is no degree that's worth any more than any other degree. Regardless of what anybody wants to do by quantifying salaries, no degree is worth any more because individuals possess those degrees and they invest the value into each individual degree. We want them to hear that and then to understand, like, we're here to support what you need, but sometimes we need to unpack some of that. It's 3 years of being in a school with no sense of direction and high achieving student, sometimes even valedictorian of their class, who gets here and fails, in their eyes, fails 2-3 semesters in a row. It's a progressive sense of your ability that's being eroded. And I haven't forgotten that. I just forgot thinking, like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. I don't know why I didn't quit. It's a miracle. We know the statistics. By the time I got to year 4, if you saw what the pathway was for me, no logical reason for me to have continued. But there's a reason. You all get to know me, you learn how stubborn I am, and it just sort of happened that way, I guess. But I just don't want to see students live in that space. And if we can beat that whole problem of sunk cost where they think they have to keep hammering away at something just because that's what they started with, we can help as well. And I admit the program's only in the second or third year, and we're still trying to figure out. There are a lot of hard conversations. We've learned that it's a big emotional toll on the advisors because, to be honest, no matter how we structure this program, half or more of the students who enter it will leave us without a degree. But I remember when we first started and the first advisor who worked with it, I said, you'll be at peace with this if you know that they leave knowing that you cared. And it doesn't matter, it's not as a representative of the university, that you cared about them. And then I told him, I remember saying, at the point they get into this program, I don't want you to think about them as students. I want you to think about them as members of a family or members of a community. And think about it that way, to say, like, we need to get away from zeroing in on degree pathway, or you've got to get that degree. What do you need? And let's reset for you a bit, because we've all seen and heard those students who come to us after a long period of time and never felt like anybody ever saw them. And that can be debilitating in the classroom.
Sure. And on the individual level, I know so many people listening or to this or watching it who have worked with a student where they've had that feeling of maybe our institution, our setting, or their experiences just aren't lining up, and that sense of loss that happens with that. But I also know that one of the things that a lot of folks who are part of our podcast audience, one of the things they've experienced is organizational change. Things moving, offices being redone, reporting lines, responsibilities, where students are. What advantages have you seen moving Waypoints sort of to an institutional level, in even though the few years it's been?
Advantages. So help me out again. The advantages in what way?
Well, you were mentioning, it sounded like that it was part of the exploratory studies program,
right?
And that that organizational change, sort of bringing it to your office, what advantages have there been in that structure?
That's a good point. I think, well, number one, just to be real, we need to stress the severity of the situation that they're in, because there's a 1-year clock, calendar year clock, and there's no negotiating that. So I think being able to say this has been I don't want to sound extremist, but it's been escalated for the student to this level. And another is, to be honest, we get a little bit I can lean a little bit. I can say, like, look, I know that they're not right at the GPA, but 1/10 of a point, is that really going to make a difference? We went to one department and said, I know that overall that GPA number, the cumulative, is not where it needs to be, but we've looked at how they performed in the classes that you have allowed them to take, and they're outperforming the students who you admitted. So is that enough? And I know these departments, I think, struggle because the volume of students is just so big. I don't blame anybody for setting metrics and then just trying to abide by them. And that's the point, is to be in a space where I can reach out to the director of a college and say, can you see this student for one time, just to kind of feel out whether this really is the right place? And, as an example, in our College of Liberal Arts, there's a philosophy major in AI. It's AI ethics. It does require science learning. And of course, AI has created this space now where you don't have to be a technologist to become knowledgeable. But it takes some coaxing to get them to open up to that. And so I think having that ability to hand off in all directions is really a valuable one too. Just between you and me and whoever's listening to this, we also sometimes the ability to say it is 1 calendar year, but you're just that close. So let's see if we can't bend the rule just enough to get you that one little step closer. And I think the advisors who have done work on this program have consistently said the students are so appreciative that this is a truly personal approach to their to where they are.
Yeah, and you mentioned AI, and I think that's a great segue to talk about that as our next topic. And we know from your bio, part of your current work focuses on the ethical integration of artificial intelligence in higher ed, with the emphasis with the use of AI to support academic advising. Many institutions are wrestling with balancing efficiency, but also kind of still having that human aspect to it. Yeah. Where do you think automation fits in with all of this, and where automation should live within academic advising?
Well, first, I appreciate you isolating it to automation, because I think one big challenge in talking to people who are still learning and moving into the space of AI is that generative tool that is and it is truly problematic. The generative tools have all of the problems in the world. Automation's a different animal. It's still kind of in the same skin, but it's still different. And for me, a lot of it is there's a lot of administrative work required to be an advisor. In Jeff Elliott's perfect world, advisors don't do any of it. My first like 2 weeks here, I was invited to a staff retreat for one of the colleges, and I wanted to do like some little breakouts where we had some smaller group conversations. So I asked my director for operations to pose this question: say, you're in a meeting with your student, and they just come in and they sit down, the power goes out. What are you going to do? And what I heard was a lot of people talking about how they were going to reschedule. And I know, again, in my position, I have a luxury of like thinking about what the ideal is, but there's a reality. And, and I was thinking, like, I don't need a damn computer to help a student talk through what they want to do, but there's no escaping that this whole profession is pointless if you don't have degree progression. And if you don't provide exceptions when they need, and you don't do a lot of those workflows. So, but what I would like to see is a way that we can lift that and streamline it and make it a lot easier for advisors. And I believe that we have an opportunity to have conversations about those 3 core competency areas of advising, and to ask ourselves, is the informational a little too broad? because in this day and age, the technological knowledge that advisors are required to do the job is far more, there's far more nuance to it than just fitting under the umbrella of information. And I think that what we're looking at now is, where does it require the expertise of an advisor and that master's degree that we require and those kind of things. And if it doesn't require that to do it, is it really appropriate for an advisor to be spending their time on it? The more important thing for me about this automation, and the reason I dove into it, is I can see the opportunity to expand the amount of time that advisors can spend with students. Because I believe that a successful advising experience is predicated on trust. And you don't establish trust in 30 minutes. It must be a continued reinforced experience. And I think, there are students who will trust you to a degree because you're a representative of their school, and but they're trusting your professional title and your role. They don't trust you. And so I think, like, for me, what I see is an opportunity I meet with our IT systems director for AI and automation regularly, and we're always like, where do we find the one-to-one? Like, where do I get 10 hours off someone's plate that become 20 more meetings with students? And how do we, expand that then in a way that we can not only just purely just for time with students, but more professional development for the advisors? Because as you get more capacity to build these relationships with students, you learn how complex and confusing human beings are. And that's where that PD is, learning how to have the hard conversation with the international student who just found out that their visa is expiring. And you want them, like, I don't have a say in what international student support is going to do. I don't have a say in that visa process. What do I do? And I know it's probably too timely an example, but I just really see these automations as a way to step away from what has become an administrative bloat on an advisor timetable, and where we sometimes really struggle to have, for me, the example that I use over and over again is, if you don't have the time that in the middle of a meeting with a student, they bring something up that needs far more time and attention than what you have in that remaining meeting. If you don't have something beyond that, what I like to call sacred time, like the week after, time that you hold that is specifically for that, then we're really making you ineffective in your role as an advisor. And so that's, for me, the biggest part of what we're looking at. I'd love to daydream about some of the things you can do with these generative tools. Like, it's really neat, the idea of, having some kind of an AI companion that students could bounce ideas off of. We play around with those kind of things. I think that's down the road. I think we just can really trim away a lot of stuff. And then as an administrator, of course, I'm just in love with the idea of these predictive analytics and post analytics that allow us to learn more about, being more effective at what we do. So I just got really fortunate to have an opportunity 2 years ago to hear from some folks on our faculty and from the CEO, I believe it was the Lumina Foundation. And these folks were talking about, this thing is coming and it's real. And I heard enough to believe it and started learning. And I believe there's a tremendous amount of opportunity in that space, but we've got a lot of hard questions to answer. And so I believe by the time this will go live, we will be, I'll be rolling out a university policy that we are restricting the use of any kind of listening device, AI-powered listening device, in session for advising. And that policy was fully informed through studies that we did with our advisors. We had faculty hold workshops with them to talk about what this looked like and find out their concerns. And right now, the idea of having something that's listening in the current environment, and with the problems that we have about questions about where this data goes, but more important than that, just what does it do to your ability to get someone to open up to you if they walk in the door and you say, let me press record? So I think I also appreciate, like, I'm at an institution that really supports me in learning more. And I'm also in a place that's not It's willing that as long as they know that I'm informed about what I'm doing, they're not pushing me to put things into place just because they're shiny new objects. And I'm just very grateful to our leadership for giving me that latitude.
Well, I certainly suffer from the shiny new object syndrome, early adopter and love playing with toys and stuff. But I think a lot of people who are engaging with this conversation about AI and its place in higher ed, academic advising, they hear the promise. They hear the promise of, we're going to get you more time. We're going to get you deeper, more meaningful connections with your students. We're going to let you be more human. But I don't know that we know what the trade-off is. What are those automated tasks that we're going to be giving over to automation and AI? In your experience, are there a handful of things that you see that are like, oh yeah, these are definitely things I can let go of from an advising role?
Yeah, well, let's say, for example, one of the things that it's not a universal, but at Purdue, students have to get approval from their advisor to drop a class. And philosophically, we could talk about that for an hour, but but their rationale is that, for example, like international students, their visa's at risk if they make a bad decision on that front. So I respect that, and we still leave that up and running. But does it really take an advisor puzzling through this? What it really is they want to be sure that students go down the checklist. Are you international? Do you have a scholarship? Do you live in a residence hall? All of these variety of things. That can be automated. Like, that could be a thing where there's a possibility for a student to just be shown before they take an action. These are things that will have possibly a consequence on you if you fit one of these categories. And then theoretically, you can then direct the student to their advisor, depending on whether that happens. Those kinds of things that are rote processes that I think that basically when advisors are switch flippers, we can find a way to do something different with that. And one of the other things, though, to turn your question a little sideways, is I've really appreciated now that our IT systems people are saying we're not so much interested anymore in automating existing processes. We're interested in finding out if we can generate new ones that replace. Or, and so, and that brings me back to my love of the liberal arts, for being the guy at Purdue who asked, well, why do we do that in the first place? And I think that I think that being able, for me, I guess the analogy I use is AI makes you move the sofa. If you clean your house, you clean your living room, did you move the sofa? No, we never moved the sofa, right? But sometimes you got to, and it is ugly under there. And so the AI kind of gives you an opportunity to break these things apart and really look at it and go, my gosh, look how many, I have to meet a metric of a certain number of personnel hours that something could conserve before IT will put it on their plate. And it makes me think then, like, oh, how good grief, how much time, as example, we tried calculating things like responses to, the time of year when, what's the last day to drop a class, emails start firing off. We're looking at, like, across as many advisors as we have, like 10,000 hours. When you try to, and this is just us, spitballing what number of hours it takes per advisor to answer those questions. But then it comes back then, and this is another reason why I love this AI thing. It's kind of forced us in, if you're going to be sensible and really be serious about your ethics. The next question is, we looked at Microsoft Power Automate. That is got enough finesse that it could answer those questions for students. But then we asked students, how would you feel if you sent your advisor an email asking about something like that, and the response came back and it was labeled, this response was generated by AI? And they told us that'd be the last time I emailed my advisor. So, as much as we see hours being saved, like to your point, Ryan, I think like we get lots of promises like, oh, this could do all of this. But if the advisors are going to have to turn around and just duplicate the work anyway, then that's not helpful. Or if it undermines our relationships with our students by kind of giving them that impression, I don't have time for you, then it's not any good to us.
Look, text messages and emails were supposed to save us too, and that has tripled the work and time that we do. Now, as we wind down with this interview, which I wish we could go on like for another couple hours with it, but something institutions have challenges with already is equity gaps. How do you help ensure that like AI adoption isn't going to widen those equity gaps?
Well, I wish I could say that I had an answer for that. There are some, it depends on the space where you're talking. First gen students, as an example. For first gen students, as I sort of roughly fall into the category of first gen, a lack of just basic information about how the stuff is done here is a major obstacle. And our insistence on creating our own language in higher ed that then they have to learn in order to navigate college is a problem. And so there's a gap because, and rather than try, you can't do case by case when you're trying to connect with first gen students, because that means then they're learning by mistake every time, or they're learning by identifying things they don't know. That's frustrating. But if there's a place where we could do something to help narrow that gap and close out that dependency we have on lingo and acronyms, and help fill in that space, I think that's that's really kind of a simplistic example. I think I don't know. I'm just going to have to admit, I think the thing that is both frustrating and fascinating about AI is it's changing so quickly. And at the same time, who we are in higher ed is changing currently and will continue to. And as these things come together, I don't know what that's going to look like. I think the important thing is that we have to stay focused on engaging with our scholar colleagues who are really digging in deep. I know just enough about AI to be dangerous and to make decisions. I like you say, right? I like to play with the tools and I like to try new things out. But I need people who are much more knowledgeable about it to tell me what the possible pitfalls are, and to help us also then figure out like the needs of a Purdue student and the needs of a student at Ivy Tech Community College, which is our community college system in Indiana. There are a lot of different needs in the same bucket, and they need different things. If we don't understand better what our students need and what they want, and are trying to provide it that way, then we're doing what we usually do. I'm laughing right now about this new initiative that's rolling out here. They're talking about this really great new idea they have about student support, and it's something that we were all doing 10 years ago. But that's the nature of higher ed, is we're very cyclical and we're very reproductive, and we do that kind of thing. And I guess I'm kind of talking around the question now, but I feel like for me, I try to remind myself every time I'm engaged in any conversation about AI, where's the trap, or where is the possible problem in that? And as long as I think I'm doing that, I'm thinking about what's fair for students and what provides them with access. The big one now is we know that very few of these students who graduate are going to get out of here and not find an employer who expects them to know something about AI. And so how do you prepare them for that? And I believe advisors are curricular translators. Our faculty are scholars in their areas, and they construct a curriculum that's based on a collective pedagogy, and it is a brilliant collection of everything that's important in their discipline. But when you try to put it on an 8-semester degree pathway, it doesn't always click. And there's always, of course, the challenge of gen ed, the engineering student who's complaining about having to take a humanities class. How do you explain to them, well, this actually does have some value to you? And so we're back in that same space now with AI. There will be students who say, I just don't want to learn this stuff. I don't trust it. Well, do you want to limit your employment opportunities? It was whether we like it or not, it's here. And so I think, that's an intriguing part of it. How do we now teach advisors how to talk to students about it as a curricular step?
Yeah, so definitely a continued conversation. It's like reading a monthly comic book. At the end, it's to be continued to the next issue.
Yeah.
But Jeff, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed this. I always love listening to you guys, and I love every time I've had a chance to bump into y'all. I will definitely find more time again. But clearly, this is a topic that I could go on about forever. I have so much love for this profession, and I just genuinely enjoy it. I think anything that gave me a chance to connect with people and to really engage in that kind of strength support and stuff like that would probably be a good fit for me. But it's just all right here in this job, and it's just such a cool thing. So I love what you all are doing, and I appreciate you creating space for these conversations.
Well, it's only the beginning of 2026, so we could always have you back on later and chat some.
Yeah, anytime. We can talk comic books too. I got the Hulk right back here behind you. It's this is an interesting one because this is I carry this around with me wherever I go because he's rampaging on a college campus, and then he runs into a statue of Socrates and knocks his head off, and then picks it up and looks in Socrates' eyes, and it calms him down. And I don't know exactly what to do with that, but it just speaks to me. So.
We'll figure it out. We'll do another. Yeah. We'll do a whole episode just on comic books.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Jeff.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thanks so much.